Welcome back to Creative Culture, a podcast that discovers creativity in all kinds of unexpected places. My name is Steve, and I'm very interested in art, making things, and learning how people express themselves. And one of the ways millions of people flex their design and artistic compulsions every year is by decorating their homes for the holidays. But every December and into the new year, emergency rooms experience a sharp increase in accidents and injuries, all associated with the holidays. Not to mention all the health issues people experience by all of the overindulgence and general stress of the season. Basically, Christmas wants to kill you. In this episode, I've invited Scott Dixon of Everyday Home Repairs back on the show to give us some tips to stay safe and possibly sane through the holidays. Maybe not so sane, but Scott is a carpenter, electrician, a plumber, and general home improvement guru whose YouTube channel is a one-stop place for pretty much learning how to do anything. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Good to be back. And I'm actually not any of those. I'm just a curious homeowner trying to share experience as we go along. So yeah, it's good. It's good to be back. Good to talk to you.
Do you know what the most common injury associated with the holidays is?
Do I? Associated to decorating or so just in general?
I would say, well, let's go associated to decorating.
Oh, I has to be like working at heights, falling off ladders. Yeah, it has to be.
Falling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the number one thing. I was looking this up and trying to figure out, where are all these injuries coming from that people are experiencing. It was actually the UCLA Health Department has like a list of the 7 most common holiday injuries. We'll get into that, but in my experience, it seems like, especially in the past decade, maybe a little bit longer, people have just been going overboard with Christmas lights, and it seems to me that a lot of what they're doing, it seems really sketchy to me with electrical power and how much they're trying to run all over the house.
Yeah, we have the stereotypical like one in your neighborhood that just literally fills like every square inch of the yard. And I looked and they had a custom made like distribution, weather tight, box so they could run the power every which direction. So they were stepping it up where a 15 amp outlet was just, not cutting it. They really had to think through how to bring the power out and then bring it to all their different decorations. They're the type that you can like tune into the AM radio station and hear the song.
They've got like one of those lightoramas. You program it on your laptop and then you can run shows.
Hey, more power to him. My son loves going over there and checking it out. And I definitely do not want to have to set something up myself like that. So,
well, they got these shows now. Well, they've had them for a while where they have like these competitions for like the most outrageous lighting displays. And some of these things, every year they just get bigger and bigger. These people are just going crazy with these things, but they always do this thing. They show them like doing the taking 2 plugs and just like plugging them together, and then the light comes on. I'm like, no, that's not the way it works. Right? I don't think you can just take a single plug. Like
don't test it ever and then get everything together and then do it. Yeah, we have a neighborhood that does these like hoops over the sidewalk and they're lit, so it makes for the really cool walkway. And I don't know how they got but almost everybody does it. And I think everybody's responsible for their sidewalk. Mm-hmm. And you do not want to be the person that breaks the walkway. So if you don't sign up for it, you got all these lit hoops, everybody's, going through the tunnel. It's so great. And then your house comes up and there's nothing.
So we had this for a long time. This whole neighborhood I live in had I guess it was like the Boy Scouts or something would come around and they would sell the luminaria, they called them. It was like they would sell you a paper bag, sand, and candles. Well, you get like 10 of them or something. I don't know. It was a fundraising thing. So you would, at Christmas Eve, you put these out on the sidewalk, and it was the same way. The entire neighborhood would be, filled with these things, except for like a couple people who were like, no, I ain't buying those
Yeah,
things. And so
effective.
it was like a neighborhood peer pressure. You're like,
Yeah,
oh
that's
God damn it, I
effective
guess we got,
marketing or
yeah.
sales or for
I know.
sure.
You don't want to be that one person, but it was always weird, all these candles lit along. I mean, it looks great and everything, and I guess there's no harm in it, but it just seemed odd to me that there's like burning candles or in a paper bag all night long.
Yeah, right. Seems
But
like
I don't know.
something could go wrong. I guess it's contained. It's a
Right.
contained fire.
So if somebody wants to put up Christmas lights on their outside of their house, what are the most common mistakes?
I mean, we already covered the most common mistake. One that comes.
Oh yeah, let's start with the falling injury, because that is the most common injury people have, and it's just because they're not using ladders right, or what do you think's going on
Well,
there?
also, I
Climbing around
mean,
on the roof?
a lot of us are super busy, maybe office workers, maybe we're not getting out and getting our steps in, and not stretching regularly. And then all of a sudden, one day, late fall, early winter comes up, and you're scaling ladders and doing more steps than you ever had, and you're tired and you're stretching. And possibly, it's cold, and possibly there's slippery conditions. So, yeah, it's kind of like the perfect storm, right, for injuries to
Right.
happen. So, but ladders in general, I think, I know I had for years and years kind of just overlooked that. Like, no matter how tall the ladder, no matter what it's setting against, you can scale it. And that is not quite the case. You can run into some issues. So, working at heights, independent of Christmas lights, can be dangerous. And the frequency of homeowners using a ladder to hang Christmas lights just goes up. So it goes with it. The other one, and this is just in general something that you can overlook, and that's extension cords. So you go down, for most homeowners, we pick up any extension cord and just plug it in. It doesn't matter on the length. I don't even know if they're paying attention to indoor, outdoor. There's actually gauge of wire in there. So you can pick, a 16 gauge extension cord, plug it into a 15 amp outlet or a 20 amp outlet. And if that extension cord is, let's say, like 100 feet long, technically you're only supposed to run 10 amps through that. So now you probably have a circuit that can deliver 20 amps, but then you have this long extension cord that's actually only rated for 10 amps. So then if you're pulling all of your lights, all of your decorations from that one point, there is some overloading issues where it can heat up, especially if it's an older extension cord.
So most of the outlets in a house would be a 15 amp outlet, I presume. So you're taking an extension cord. Now this is probably a really common scenario. People take maybe one of those orange, like 14 gauge or 16 gauge exterior. They think they're doing this right. They get the exterior cord, they run it out, maybe even like a 50-foot cord, because they got to run it from the garage or something, and it's out there. And then you've got like 100 strands of lights that you want to run. So you buy a power strip. Maybe it's got a 6 outlet power strip. You've got that sitting out on the end of this extension cord. Then you're running extension cords from maybe thinner extension cords, maybe even the ones that are kind of those indoor outdoor extension cords, those green ones. And so you're running those from each of those power strip outlets. Is there an inherent danger in just approaching it this way?
Yeah, I mean, there's all risk. So, and if you don't have an exterior outlet and you're like running it through a metal frame screen and like pinching it in there to try not to let a draft in type of thing, you can come to some issues. I think it is dwarfed by the working at heights danger. But now with LEDs, the actual power draw is so much less than like older, a couple decades ago, where you were actually pulling some load, because each one of those bulbs was creating heat, and obviously that takes a lot of energy. So the LED lights don't pull, anywhere near the overall watts that you would see in the past.
They're just generally safer to use anyways. I mean, and plus, God, they're such a pain in the ass. I remember the days when you would miss a light bulb.
It was in series. Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah, in series. And so you'd have to like try to figure out which one it was.
Oh man, no doubt. So
that was some serious shit.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a good portion of the population that doesn't even know that struggle. they never went through that. They never went
You're
through
right.
the
It's
one ball ruining your holidays. One
right.
small ball can take you out.
Yeah, and the little itty bitty fuses on the ends of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess that's a really good thing to have in there. Those little tiny fuses on the ends of those strands.
Yeah. So I mean, we can do a little test.
Let's do a demo.
Let's do,
for everybody listening to the audio podcast, you need to go over to YouTube,
right?
So you can see an actual demo of a whole big wad of Christmas lights.
Well, and we're actually going to monitor how many watts that guy comes in. If I can get the glare off there.
Okay.
So we got,
whoa, that's bright.
Yeah. So we got about 250 feet of LED bulbs in the background there.
Is that like one single strand?
It's 3 strands together, and one I could only get 50 feet of it. So yeah, so we're pulling 250 feet of LED lights, at least this vintage, which is a few years old, is pulling 70 watts. So normal 120 circuit, it's just voltage times amperage. So it's less than one amp. So it's actually not too bad. And then you could just, if we say less than 1 amp, right? We talked about 15 amp outlets. We talked about a 16 gauge extension cord, 50 feet long, can take 13 amps. So you can start to understand, how many of these things could I daisy chain into one extension cord, right? Safely. Because on some of these, if it's going into a 20 amp circuit, there's not much stopping you from going way over what that extension.
It seems like the packages always say no more than 3 strands.
Yeah, there usually is a maximum amperage rating on that because those small wires back there, what's the gauge on that, right? So if you're running that load through the start of that small wire and that's in series all the way along, you could be pulling quite a bit through a small gauge and possibly have an issue there.
But it looked like you had plenty of room left on these 3 strands that you've got together.
Oh yeah, that's the LEDs.
You could chain together more than 3.
Oh yeah, way more.
So that's not. So when they say don't chain together more than 3, it's just
you can look and see what look and see on the back what that amperage, because it does vary. So I'm sure some higher end Philips or whatever holiday lights are probably a thicker gauge than your lowest end. So it is something that, depending on the size and scale of what you're doing, could go over. But we're not done with the demos.
Okay, good.
We are not done. I don't know how this is going to play out, but we have another cord here.
I really kind of am hoping there's an explosion involved with this.
I'm hoping not. I mean, that could play into your injury stuff. So, all right. So we got our power analyzer, another cord. So we got some stuff going on. This is
what I'm hearing.
This is a very popular type.
It's an inflatable.
Yeah, we'll see if he can.
Oh, I was not expecting that.
See if he can make it.
Oh shit! It's a big dinosaur inflatable.
Yeah, 9 foot. All right.
Okay.
So
dinosaur with a Santa cap, and he's holding a present in his mouth. He's a big T-Rex.
Pretty impressive. That whole 9 foot T-Rex with a rotating head actually only pulls 111 watts. So it's right at about 1 amp, which is less than I thought. So we can let him gracefully.
Oh, that was not graceful.
Go stage right.
Collapsed. Right.
Yeah, the rotation mechanism's a little. So more, but I was actually a little bit surprised it didn't pull more with the motor in there and the fan.
And how much was that pulling again?
111 watts compared to 70 watts on the 250 feet of LEDs. So because you see whole yards filled with those inflatables. So, I mean, technically, 16 gauge extension cord, 50 feet, you could handle almost 13 of those guys on one extension cord. So it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be overall. He's still deflating back there.
He's still deflating. So maybe it's not as cause for concern as people think. about running so many electrical things during Christmas?
I think it's one of those things that has a little bit of legacy. I
Okay.
think there were some concerns, in the 80s and 90s, and LEDs and some of these more efficient power electronics have at least pulled the draw down in terms of
Okay.
what you're going to be pulling. Um, so it's not a massive that dinosaur 111 watts. Let's say you run it 10 hours a day. That's 1.1 kilowatt hours. In my area is only 8 cents. So that would take
Wow.
8 cents to run that per day. So you can multiply that out and see what you think your cost is going to be, but it's not too bad.
That's why you need a solar system.
Yes, you can offset it, harvest the sun.
I'm going to have to get into that a little bit here pretty soon too. But what about weather, harsh weather on outdoor electrical stuff? And if you've got these things daisy chained to get together, is there anything you need to do to like seal up that connection between cords, or is it fine just to plug them in and just let the snow and rain and whatever hit them?
Well, I mean, as National Electrical Code has progressed, it updates every 3 years. So new regulations have went in every 3 years to try to make these things more safe in terms of your receptacles and just your overall electrical system. So if you have an older house, you can probably find a somewhat weather tight cover that has 2 outlet covers on it. And that most likely is not ground fault current interrupt compliant, GFCI. It's probably just going right into the circuit. So what that means is if you had a GFCI on your exterior, which is what you need and has been in code for over a decade now.
We just got all of ours replaced
Nice.
last year, by the way.
Yeah, and they kind of do wear out. So
Yeah.
they have kind of a 10-year life. And some of the new ones, you'll see LEDs on the front. They'll do self-checks. Go look at your GFCIs, and they actually will have printed on them test monthly, which no one ever tests
What?
monthly.
Everybody does that.
Oh,
Everybody does that.
Yeah, for sure.
Test monthly. That's right. It does say that.
Right when they're changing their furnace filters.
I wish I knew. Get started.
I wish I knew how long furnace filters actually stay in, but
well, they say every 3 months that you should do
I rolled
that.
a 3 month.
Do you think that's true? I'm totally getting sidetracked here, but as a side,
you can see that there might be some bias there if you sell furnace filters.
That's what I mean. I take them out. This is something I actually have on my calendar. So every 3 months, I buy them in bulk on Amazon, and I get it out of there. I'm like, well, I don't know. It doesn't look that bad to me.
Yeah. So I do not get totally distracted. I do every 3 months, and I don't use it as an air filter, which I kind of had done in the past. So I went way up on like the MERV scale or whatever.
Yeah.
Now I'm just like 7 or 8. It takes large debris out of the air, but it also lets
no longer flexing that MERV scale, are you?
Yeah. So now you can actually the motor can run. It's not pulling some suction. So
anyways, back to the exterior lights.
GFCI. So GFCI, the nice thing is if you did something wrong and that hot conductor was to find a new path to ground, maybe that is through you, maybe you're touching an open wire and then you're going to get bit because you're creating a path to ground because it always wants to return to ground. If it's a standard outlet, you're going to get bit and then probably trip the breaker. So you would trip at 15 amps, 20 amps. GFCI, it actually has nothing to do with the ground, which confuses everybody. It detects the difference between the hot and neutral conductors. So it's just always making sure that that's balancing, that it's returning through the neutral wire. So when it doesn't balance, and that can be just a very small micro amp for a very short period of time, that's when it trips. So if you're plugging things into a GFCI and an extension cord's damaged, maybe you have the plug partially together and someone or something touches that hot side, the GFCI is going to trip, and that's where the safety aspect comes in. So check your exterior outlets, see if they're old. That is something worth investing in, is kind of updating those to GFCI. it should not be a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And on my channel, I have multiple different like install videos. I just did one on brick and installing it for the first time. Like you don't even have it. You know, how do we get that circuit in there and how do we install?
Oh, cool.
And the new covers are called in-use covers. So those are real nice. They're a little bulky, but you can plug something in and cover it with a weather tight seal.
Because that
while
always
you're
bugs me when you have that cover open. I'm like, well, now it kind of defeats the point of having a cover.
So I like the in-use covers, and not every cover is an in-use cover.
No. And so what's the difference then between the GFCI and just your breakers?
It's that detection between the hot and neutral side. So it's able to actually monitor the break.
So a GFCI would be more for protecting you, a person, rather than just the whole circuit itself.
Yeah, that's why it's in your wet. Like that's why it's called out in the wet areas. You know,
because
wet areas would be more prone that than you, wet hand, feet, whatever, would create that return to ground. Because if you have rubber soled shoes on, you touch a hot conductor, you're not touching anything else. I don't advise doing this, but you're not necessarily going to be the path of least resistance to ground, right? So you got to create that ground. In wet areas, that's more likely that you could do that.
And so if you're setting up a bunch of lights on your house, you're going to know if there's a problem based on the fact of either the GFCI is going to flip off or you're going to throw a breaker if you're just running too much of a load there.
Too much, yeah. And you can, technically, if you're really redlining it here on a 16 gauge extension cord, go touch it or hover your hand over it. It will be getting hot. Like if you're pumping amperage through that, it's causing resistance. That's why the amperage that you can run through a cord goes down as the distance goes up, because the resistance goes up. And when you run higher amperage through more resistance, that creates heat. So the extension cord will be actually warm, and then if you're really going after it, it's hot. So I've done some of those tests on the channel using like a little FLIR thermal imaging camera on the end of my iPhone. And because I was testing like wire nuts and wire connectors, because some people said, oh, those things get hot, they have a ton of resistance. And it was like, okay, let's test it out. So we would like thermal image the wire nuts to see how hot they're actually getting. And I did find some on Amazon that were actually or not recommended, let's say, to use.
Well, you just want to bury those cords under snow and keep them cool.
Yeah. Just reject that heat, no problem.
Clearly, that's the solution here.
But I like
go ahead.
A distribution stake. So they make those distribution stakes with like a timer on it. So then you could have a respectable 14 gauge exterior rated extension cord to a GFCI in-use cover outlet, right? So now you have pretty good amperage across that. And then you go to the distribution hub, and then you're pulling probably smaller cords from that distribution hub, because each branch is only going to be pulling what that branch is pulling, opposed to at that stake where you're bringing it all together.
So it sounds like most of the electrical safety risks might be a little bit overblown at this point.
I personally think so. Yeah.
Because I mean, if you've got circuit breakers, GFCI, it's going to stop anything from happening. It would be very unlikely you're going to get a fire as long as you've got those things in place, which of course everybody does.
Yeah. I should have got one, but they have the plug covers. So they have those like little cylinders that clamshell open and then close around your. Those are nice. Those are pretty. You can grab them off Amazon or your local home improvement store. That's not a bad idea. If you have some plugs like laying on the ground, wrapping them in some type of weather seal is a good idea.
There you go, everybody. You got permission from Scott to just light up.
Yeah.
Fill that house.
Where's that disclosure? Yeah. At your own risk.
If anything happens, you can come back and say Scott said it was fine. Well, I want to get back to the falling hazards because this is the most common thing, and I think you're right. A lot of it has to do with people who are just out of shape, and this is the only time of the year they get up and try to climb a ladder. But What are some rules of thumb with just using a ladder? Because I think most people just think you prop it up and you're good to go.
I think it's kind of, uneven ground, so you don't have good footing. If you have a helping hand and they're actually there, holding the ladder for you, stretching out and going beyond the actual ladder base itself, um, having too many things in your hands. Whenever you're on like heavy equipment or something, there's always like the
Yeah.
3 points of contact was always the best practice. So if you're holding a ton of stuff in your one hand and then you're moving up the ladder, you're actually on like 2 points of contact at any given time as you shuffle up that. So you got to
Well, we
be,
don't want to have to make 2 trips,
well, I
carry
know.
everything all at once.
Yeah, yeah. So take your time, make sure, and know your own limits. We're not all created
And
equal
it should, the
here.
angle of the ladder though is important too, because I think a lot of us, and I've been guilty of this too. I have an extension ladder, and it's just like not quite long enough. So I've got like a 5-degree angle. I mean, it's just it's almost vertical.
Going
And
vertical. Yep.
yeah, is there like a OSHA kind of recommended angle that should be, or do you know?
I'm sure there is. I do not know. One thing
Yeah.
that I've been guilty of is actually like needing to place a ladder on a window and putting it not necessarily on the glass, but on like the sash.
Yeah.
You want to stick away from that kind of stuff.
Also gutters too. I
Mhm.
think we all kind of push the extension ladder against the gutter, and that just seems really sketchy to me. I know they have like little extension things you can put on the top of the ladder that actually press into the roof
They have
itself.
that, and they also have the legs that would go like you can go around corners, you can go
Yeah.
around a window, right? So you can be right on the window, but the actual contact points are on the siding of your house. Or
Yeah.
so yeah, there's all that equipment now, whether or not you have it and you're using it.
Because it's only one time a year,
And one, I
It's the only
wouldn't,
time you're getting up there.
if you're going crazy, right? If you're going like all out for your decoration, don't underestimate your rental store. So they have all those man
Hmm.
baskets and man lifts. I know that looks a little intimidating, but you can rent those for pretty inexpensive. And
That's
then
a good point.
and little pro tip for you guys is if they're closed on Saturday or Sunday, usually you can go on Friday and rent that man basket. And whether you're getting a big telescoping arm one or you're getting the one that has a lot more degrees of freedom and maybe just, it's more for kind of working around the base of that opposed to really reaching out. You can get it on Friday. You can pay 1 day rental and you can keep it until Monday morning and actually only pay 1 day rental as long as you don't usually go over 8 hours on what's called the service meter reading, which would be like the diesel engine running. Or I think the battery powered ones, probably just like the main disconnect being on. But the beautiful thing about that is, that you're not doing a bulldozer here where you got to push dirt the whole time. You're like moving to a location and you're stopping and you're
Right.
like hanging. So 8 hours of like the engine actually running is a long, long, long time of actually hanging lights. So you might be surprised of the actual rental rate from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then bring it back on Monday if they're closed on both those days because they won't charge you.
God, that's a great point, because I think it's a real overlooked resource is those rental places. I've rented jackhammers and trenchers and things, and every time I get them, I think, wow, this is so totally worth it, because I
Oh
don't want to
yeah.
sit there with a shovel and try to dig a trench,
Or like
30.
grinding a concrete floor, which I was doing yesterday, and doing it with like a 4-inch angle grinder opposed to like a commercial concrete
Yeah.
grinder. Like,
It's a huge difference.
oh, it is massive difference. And then
Yeah,
your eyes open, you're like, oh my God, that's how they do these projects. Because when you're using
absolutely.
like the small grinder, you're like, how either I'm doing this completely wrong or like
Yeah.
I am not quite the person I thought I was because this sucks.
Well, it's perfect for things that you don't want to buy these things because you're not going to use them hardly ever. Like a
No.
tile cutter, if you're going to be putting
Yeah,
tile in the
yeah.
bathroom or whatever, that it's like a wet tile cutter, and I've rented those before, and it's like, wow, this is the way to
I
go.
teeter-totter between Harbor Freight and renting. So sometimes I go to Harbor Freight and just buy the thing I'm going to use once or twice, and I hope it makes it, through that
Yeah.
application. But yeah, I do. I do a lot. I do the mini excavators. I do skid steers. I do man lifts I'm not very good at dropping trees, so I'll just pick them apart. I'll go to the top and just start picking all the branches off. Massive rotary hammer drills is kind of a classic from there. And then anything with flooring, like if you're scraping a bunch of old glue off or whatnot, you go for their commercial equipment, and it makes
those sanders, those walking sanders, if you're going to refinish hardwood floors or something.
Just like a world of difference.
You pretty much do everything, don't you? There's nothing you won't DIY.
I like to take on most. I'm not very good. What I'm not good at, I'm not that good at drywall. Haven't done a lot of tiling. Painting gets old pretty quick.
Well, it does. Drywall is very difficult, but I think that most of us, probably what we do is we just slather on a whole bunch of goop over top of it, and it's textured.
Yeah. Oh, I like that textured finish. Well, thank you. I installed an outlet. It was a single outlet, Super Designer, and they had a plate that you had to actually mud in. So it takes a 1 gang box that usually you get 2 outlets, right? A duplex outlet. It goes down to 1 circular, and then you put this cover on, but the cover, then you have to mud into place. So it's this very just modern circular outlet. And I forget what the cost was. It was like a total cost of like $250 because you had to buy the $80 removal tool. The only way to get it out is you had to have this very specifically milled cylinder. It was the dumbest idea I've ever seen.
Oh man!
And you have to like feather it out. It was just it was a terrible idea.
The whole DIY industry, though, is filled with gimmicks and gadgets, and everybody thinks they've got the next great thing to sell you.
This one was funny because it was like the extreme. It was like a modern touch, and the more practical application, which they pushed, was like cutting a circle in marble or something. So like on a very nice kitchen island, and then you cut a single little hole and put the outlet through there, and it's just this very, I don't know, it wasn't for me.
So you know what I hear every year when they're giving out like holiday tips for safety and everything? They always say like, make sure you keep those candles away from the tree. Isn't this another one of these legacy things? Because it just seems so crazy. I mean, I guess of course if you have a live tree, not a live tree, but a real tree, and it's been there for a couple of months and it's all drying up and everything, I guess sure. But like artificial trees are all fire resistant. And who puts candles in their trees anyways? I mean, that's just like Victorian times or something.
It is. Yes, exactly. It comes from some European tradition or whatever. But yeah, no, I don't think after not as many of us won't go out and harvest a tree, right? To bring it home, which is kind of making a comeback a little bit just from an experience level. Yeah, I think there's less concerns on that in terms of fire hazards. And I think the other dangers are more just people are out moving around more in the holiday season. So let's say Christmas Eve and Christmas come up and you get an ice storm. I mean, inherently with families all moving around, there's some opportunity for everything from car accidents to slips and falls to, so there's a lot of challenges that come with that.
Yeah, that's one of the 7 common holiday injuries listed in this UCLA health article. And I don't live in a place with a lot of ice and snow, but you combine that with, well, I don't live in a place with any ice and snow.
You're rubbing it in? Yeah, rubbing it. Okay. All right. Yeah.
But,
Illinois.
But I know you lived out there somewhere in the
middle
Midwest of somewhere. I don't know. It's not California. It's not New York. It's in there someplace. But what and it's probably the biggest, and it even cites that in this article, is just so many people are drinking, which it adds to the problem.
Ice,
when you're going out on ice, and alcohol just does not mix.
Late nights.
Get an Uber, for crying out loud. I mean, you don't need to be driving. Let him slide on the ice, and hopefully he's not drunk. But do they still do they still put salt on this? I assume that's still a thing, right? Salting streets and sidewalks and
More,
things. And
more,
should you do that to your own?
yeah. So most of the northern states, salt is a real thing and a big thing, and it wreaks havoc on like metal steps and cars and all that. Yeah. But it's absolutely a thing, because when it's icing out, and it's always bad when you have like the thaw cycle. So then like the gutters that weren't cleaned out or overfilled, and then it starts to melt. So then it drips right on the steps or the stair, whatever. And then it like gets a deep freeze. And then you go into like a, 0 or negative degrees Fahrenheit. The only way to get that off is just to super over salt it and let it actually thaw out with the lower freezing point. So yeah, it's definitely a thing here. And with my rentals that I'd managed, that was something that I would have to go out and shovel. And with the snow here, it's always, you want to get the snow off early, because often it again will freeze and then like hard pack, and if a bunch of you drive on it or people walk on it, then it's a lot harder to shovel off. This is a struggle. It's a struggle of Illinois, Steve. You won't.
The struggle is real, man.
Yeah, you're not going to understand.
See, and while you're up putting those Christmas lights up, you got to clean out that gutter while you're there.
No, you can. That is a quick tip right there. I exactly thought of that. I saw a guy on the roof coming home. Yeah, I think it's a double dip. You already got your ladders all out. Hopefully, it's reasonable conditions. So, yep, clean them out. Get your 5-gallon bucket and kind of scoop them out, put them in there, do a few cycles, and get them cleaned out.
What about snow blowers? Is that something? Do a lot of people use those?
It comes and goes. We are hit or miss with snow in our area. So when we get a mega snow, then everybody goes out and thinks they need a snow blower. Here, I'd say 1 out of 5 homeowners have it.
How often do you think you would use it a year? How many times?
Twice on average.
See, is that really worth it?
I mean, when you get the big snow, you're like, oh my God, I need a snowblower. But
that's a lot of weight trying to shovel all that.
The rest of the year, you're like, what is this thing doing in my garage?
It takes up a lot of space.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe not get a snowblower.
They have electric ones now. Ego is coming out with some pretty respectable, cordless monster battery snow throwers. They came out with, I think, 2 new models, and I don't know how long the batteries last, but the specs look pretty respectable. So like most things, the battery powered cordless, is kind of taking over. I went into Home Depot, I looked at push mowers, and I think there's like 24 different offerings there in stock, and 4 of them were gas engines. So things are ready or not, you're going to be switched.
Everything is changing with that. I think we might have talked about that last time you were on the show, but where I live, they're just like banning a lot of these, especially these 2-cycle engines. It's really loud and polluting engines. But the electric stuff is,
we're close.
Good.
It's way better if the battery capacity lasts a while. So I got a Makita and I got an Ego, and I did a test on the channel, and like I ran them through a torture test of like 8-inch long grass, and the Makita only lasted, I think it was like 12 or 14 minutes. It was drained pretty quick. So depending on what you're doing, I've seen some all electric lawn care guys popping up on YouTube, and then they have solar panels on the enclosed trailer. So then they're like charging, they have a massive battery in there, and then from that massive battery, they distribute out to the different battery chargers. It's pretty cool little setup.
Nice. Do you recommend people getting their fireplaces, chimneys cleaned every year? Is that still a thing? The chimney sweep? Good day, governor. Gonna clean your chimney.
The thing that I've never lived in a house that we actually had a wood burning that we used quite a bit, because now pretty much every house in the last few decades is just natural gas, kind of more of a decorative than any sort of functionality.
See, I had a fireplace and I covered it up with drywall because we just weren't using the thing. It was just sitting there, and I thought, wow, this is prime real estate. On that whole wall is just wasted for this dumb fireplace.
And then the next owner is gonna like uncover it and be like, oh my God.
I put like Easter eggs.
He covered this up.
They'll see the chimney on the roof and they'll be like,
where is this thing?
Yeah. I know somebody told me that you should put like some when you're like hiding things in a wall there, put like an SD
Oh yeah.
card or something in there that says like evidence.
No, it's like no. Now it's like Bitcoin or whatever. They're
Well,
like,
yeah,
like, oh
that
my
would be.
gosh, I found it.
So is there a real danger to fireplace or chimneys
Yeah.
and catching on fire?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's similar to like my grill, right? So I'm dripping some type of not necessarily fat on the grill. It's fat, it builds up. If that catches fire, you can have a big issue. Well, I think the buildup of burning the firewood can coat the inside of the chimney. And then if the heat gets to a certain level, I think that can go up and you can have some big problems. So,
Ooh.
but I think most people that functionally have use firewood and use it at the frequency their I'd say practical knowledge maybe like is quite a bit higher. I'm not saying everybody's doing
Yeah.
it right, but they're probably aware that there's going to be some maintenance items. But now it's just so uncommon. It's more of a like
For wood burning fires.
yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
novelty
Wait,
Airbnb cabin thing.
I'm pretty sure wood burning fires are banned here where I live just because of the
What do
pollution that
you
they cause.
what can you guys do out there? Just
We can
enjoy
use
the
those
sun? Just
fake
enjoy
logs or electric logs and enjoy the sun. Right.
just
We live
surf.
in a
You guys just
fire
surfing all
area.
day. Yeah. Okay.
Everything catches on. Everything's going to kill you. All the
Oh,
fire
you guys,
here.
yeah, you guys do have that out
That's.
there. uh,
And what about, here's another one. Okay, I'm going to go through this list for a couple of these
mhm.
other things. Okay, so we did automobile accidents are heavy. That's because everybody's drunk. Strained back and neck injuries. Okay, we kind of covered
That's
that
the
with people
snow.
just.
Well, that's a shovel and snow, man. So,
Oh, right. Yeah, and
it's
people just
like
sitting on their ass the rest of the year, not getting any exercise. So
wet snow is like no joke. If you have a big driveway and the snow is wet, it's a little heavier
yeah.
per scoop. It's literally like all exercise for all year rolled up in like an hour, So yes,
and you're probably not doing it right because there's like a twisting motion to shoveling that's really
yeah,
unnatural.
you're like you're are you lifting with your legs instead of your back, and
Right.
then like it's the weight is elevated out in front of you as you're bending, and then you're twisting under load. It's like it's a video on how to throw your back out. Do exactly this.
So hire some neighborhood kids to do that shit.
Oh man, that's probably worth every dollar for sure.
I wonder how much neighborhood kids charge these days. I don't know.
Well, and it's a win. It's a win-win for them. It's like you go out, hustle some driveways. Oh man, you can make a killing. Heck yeah!
Yeah, I'll bet. Especially if you got yourself a snowblower, just go up and down the street. And
battery powered. Yeah, there you go.
You're doing something right there. Let's see. Okay, here's another one that's very common. This is kind of dumb. Cutting yourself.
Oh, is that like cutting open like presents and
using scissors or a knife? It says always cut away from yourself. Okay.
Yeah,
we're getting a little deep in the weeds here.
I laugh, but I've done that.
And then the last one that it mentions is toy related injuries. I was just imagining like stepping on Legos or something.
No, that's like the hoverboards or whatever.
That's exactly what it is. It says non-motorized scooters account for 21% of those injuries, and it's just because somebody gets the gift of the new scooter, they don't have no idea what to do with it. Boom, bang, and they're probably not wearing a helmet. And I know some people are like, kids don't need to wear helmets all the time, but man, put a helmet on them.
Have you? Yeah, but you see all these like all the one wheels and all the electric scooters now. They can go like 32 mile an hour on the sidewalk, and I don't know, man. I would be wearing. I'm not a big like helmet guy, but I would be wearing something.
I don't want my head crashing against the concrete at 30 miles an hour.
Some of those are crazy. Kids. Yeah, I see some of these guys zipping around here, and it's like, oh man. I mean, one acorn in your path, and you're like,
right. You're down. You know, it's like I don't understand this whole attitude. It's like, oh man, you're just I don't know, week or something for wearing a helmet. It was just dumb. It's like table saw. It's like, oh, I'm just going to use my hands instead of a push
Yeah,
stick.
yeah,
What are you gaining
yeah,
from this?
yeah.
You're
You're
going to get
not
like
going to win
extra
that.
man
Yeah,
points or something.
not going to win that battle. No.
So what's this? How's your new channel doing? You've got the solar channel, and
Yeah,
this is all devoted to like building a solar
it's
setup on your own house,
yeah,
or
it's
just
pretty
kind of
much
general
focused
info?
on do-it-yourself solar, like DIY. Think all these portable power stations now, that have quite a bit of battery capacity, and then you can charge them with solar power. So that's for camping trips, tailgating, job sites, whatever it is. So I do quite a bit with that. And then just understanding like what's the difference between wiring two panels in series compared to parallel? Why would you do that? So going through those, putting solar panels on sheds so you can power, you can charge those batteries as we just talked about in the equipment. And then I just did get solar on my house professionally installed. So then I'll do a video on like walking through that process. How long does it take? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And then sprinkle in some important topics, but pretty boring topics, which is like net metering, tax credits, some of these things
Hmm.
that are important, but there's not a ton of people that want to watch a talking head video about like tax
Yeah.
credits and stuff. So
Is this a good time to outfit your house for solar? Is there's like no
Illinois,
better time than now?
yeah, let's jump into tax credits now that you brought
Yeah.
it
Oh, I
up.
mean that's what I got when I had ours
Illinois is really
installed.
good. So Illinois and like New Jersey and some of the others, because you get a 30% tax credit, assuming you're paying in tax that year that you could then reduce it off of. And then it's a net
Yeah, and that's a
metering
tax credit. That's better than a
credit,
deduction. Yeah.
not a deduction. You're not reducing your adjusted gross income. You're literally getting the $10,000 or $15,000 back. So and then for Illinois, why it's so much better here is there's renewable energy credits. So they'll wait for a little while, see how much you're producing, and then they will give you the equivalent of 15 years of that production of your system. And then every megawatt hour is multiplied by some rate, like $70. So it ends up being almost as much as the tax credit. And then we have one-to-one net metering. So what net metering means is basically the utility is your battery. So, like right now, as we speak, I'm producing way more solar than I'm using.
And you feed it into the grid.
And I feed it in the grid, and they're basically like a year-long battery for me. At any time, I can pull that out, especially in like the AC cooling season where my loads on my house are going to go way up compared to now where I'm using gas to heat the home. So Illinois payback period. So if I invest a certain amount of money, when would I expect to save that amount of money and then pay off that investment? We're somewhere around 6 to 7 years right now, which is
Totally worth it.
pretty good. And if you are commercial and in certain areas, there's like insane programs. I'm talking there's literally like multi-million-dollar installments going in with a payback period of 16 months
Wow.
because of Department of Agriculture credits and tax credits and renewable energy credits and the net metering and like all these programs. Now, should all those programs be out there? And all, I mean, because there's some pretty insane projects going on where, again, they're getting all the money back in like 16 months for these massive installments. So it can be a very good time depending on where you're at. Not every state's like that. Not every utility's like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to kind of do your own homework. I know, Steve, for you in California, some of the net metering and different things took a hit not too long ago, where it makes probably batteries a little more
Mm-hmm.
practical. And the nice thing about batteries right now, like in most areas, it's so we said the utility was your battery. Well, what
Yeah.
happens if they don't give you that one-to-one exchange? Well, you might
Mm-hmm.
want some local battery storage, which still is on the borderline of pricey. Is
Because
that
they're expensive. We looked
yeah?
into the Tesla batteries a few years
But
back,
the
but it just
cost curve is plummeting. So in terms of like
mm-hmm.
how much it costs you to get 10 kilowatt hours of storage or whatever it is plummeting. So you can kind of start scoping out what you need and then maybe hold off a couple years and it'll be
Yeah.
half price. Like it's the
Wow.
automotive industry and just the push for battery capacity is moving the cost down substantially.
Well, and that's just it. If you've got an electric vehicle, you just really should get solar anyways. And
Mm-hmm.
we, so they do the true up here every year. Once a year, you get like the true up where either you owe the electric company money because you didn't produce
Mm-hmm.
enough power, or they owe you some money. And so this was the first year we had to pay them a little bit. But I had a new hot tub installed
Oh
last
yeah, you
year,
did. Yeah.
and it's drawing some, yeah,
Yeah, I think
drawing
the
some power.
solar super interesting. And there's something about, I didn't know this until I started. There's something about harvesting the sun, like that people really get into, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe they're not even running all the numbers. Maybe the payback period is like 20 years, but they're just
It,
way more aware of their power consumption. I know for
yeah.
me, it was not
It's
like that.
totally true. Yeah. We have an app that just runs
Yeah.
right on. You can look at and you see how much you're
Oh, yeah.
running and how much it's
What's going in, what's
storing.
going out. So you just
Mhm.
become much more aware of what's going on, which I think overall is a good thing. Like understanding your home and understanding what is consuming, and how many panels do you actually need. So we're doing a lot of calculators, just getting started on everydaysolar.com, where you could be like, how many panels do I need to offset my Tesla Model 3? I drive 60 miles a day. These are the panels I'm looking at, and then it does the calculations for you, and has a drop down of like all the different cars and what their efficiency is. So you can kind of understand that of, if I have panels now, or I'm thinking about panels but I don't have a car yet, what if I do get one? How much does that move? And it moves the needle for sure. It's something you got to take into account.
Is it installing solar panels? Is that really a practical DIY kind of thing, or
No,
is that
it's,
like next level? You kind of really have to know what you're doing.
yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. So especially a full system on your home, definitely next level. I mean, I'm not even doing it on the channel yet. I will roof mount some on a detached garage that I took like off grid. So I got batteries in there. I'm just, tinkering. I'm doing some different projects and stuff. So that will be kind of my start. But then when you're tying into the grid, so that is a big
Yeah,
dividing
right.
line, is
Yeah.
like off grid compared to tying in on grid. Obviously you have all your inspections and following all your codes, and you got to get commissioned by the utility. And so it's not that you shouldn't be following those rules off grid, but there's just more things that you need to go through. So I think that's the dividing line. Is it doable? Yeah, it is doable, but you would have to have some fairly serious chops in electrical and DIY.
Yeah. That seems like a lot. But I think that, you know, it just seems right to get solar power. I think that obviously everything is heading in that direction. I mean, it seems like all new buildings are being constructed with solar power. A lot of places are kind of requiring it for new construction too.
Yeah, I got a little micro inverter. And all a micro inverter means is panels like the one behind me here. This is a 360-watt panel. Um, that's DC. So it takes DC, the inverter then converts it to AC. So the micro does it right like at the panels. So on Amazon, you could get these micro inverters that would take in 4 panels, and then it gives you basically a plug, and then you can go plug it into your wall outlet, and that feeds the
Hmm.
solar into your house. Now, I know that sounds like, wait, what? Very sketchy, but it's called plug and play solar. It's much more accepted and approved in Europe. They're kind of balcony systems, and they
Huh.
usually max out at 600 watts, but it literally goes into a plug in your. So it does the inversion, and then boop, you plug it in. It's more accepted in Europe because they are on a 220, 230, 240 volt
Yeah.
system, and that's the more common output for inverters. But I'm investigating more. I tried one out, it burned out after like 2 days. It's total crap.
Really?
Yeah, do not get it.
We've got a homeless encampment near us, and they've got a couple of solar panels up there.
Dang.
I'm like, wow,
That's high
I don't know where
end.
they got those, but it's like
Guys,
bougie homeless
you guys
encampment.
getting pretty comfortable over there. How long are you gonna be staying? So yeah, I'm digging in a little bit more of that. I love that concept, but obviously there's all sorts of UL ratings, IEEE. Actually, California has some ratings because you are tying into the grid, even with a little plug and play system, right? So you have to get approved by your utility, which I'm actually pushing it. I got emails out to the utility. I'm looking at another one that has all the certifications, assuming it doesn't burn out in 2 days, like the one off Amazon. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting concept just to get you going in solar. And it's much, it's happening in Europe very commonly.
Yeah. Well, Scott, do you have any last tips for the holidays? Keep people safe.
Enjoy it. Know your limitations. Don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're gonna drink, have a glass of water between each drink, please.
Yeah. If there's freezing rain and you're drinking, probably don't hang those lights right at that time.
Or use the snow blower.
Yeah. So.
All right, Scott, it was great talking to you again.
All right, thanks, Steve.